Hello, everyone. Let's get started on EIPIP meeting number 8. Does anyone want to run the meeting today? Otherwise, I'm happy to run it. Going once, going twice, and I'm running the meeting.
Sold to Hudson.
It's sold to Hudson. Um, okay, so the agenda we have today, the first item is the EIP centric model subgroup, what the next steps are for that. Um, whose was that from last time? Was that James?
Yeah, that was James. The idea was to have a group that's similar to an EIP editor, has merged permissions under a stricter criteria.
Yep, that's right. I think we can move that to another meeting.
Yeah, I was
That's why
thinking it won't fit into today's meeting, most of the stuff we have going on.
yep, we can leave it as something to address later.
Okay. Um, moving EFI to its own EIP. Um, oh, hold on a second. I think Axix joined. Hey, can you hear us, Alex?
Hey, I can hear you guys, but I'm mostly just joined to listen.
Okay, no problem. All right, we're on agenda
Cool.
item number 2 now. Moving EFI to its own EIP and reference that in EIP 1. If I remember correctly, the idea behind this is not to have too much stuff in EIP 1, so and also to allow for quicker iteration on the EFI process and to better separate it from um, what would be, I guess, the hard fork process versus the EIP1 process. Is it would be in its EFI would be in its own EIP. Um, I think this also was something James had brought up before. So if you want to take it, James, or anyone else.
My memory is we were undecided which direction we wanted to take, and we kind of talked about both, and then didn't ultimately come to a conclusion. Like whether it's have more information in EIP1 and have bare bones registration in EFI, or having more information in the EFI EIP and have that one evolve into the like hard fork coordination process that is yet to be determined, and leave and push more information into that EIP.
Okay. Who has
I,
opinions on that?
I may, it's not an opinion. Just maybe just a historical background. I think so. When Nick Johnson was like really active in the EIP, in EIPs, and I think a lot of the things, the way they are right now, were influenced by Nick, and his opinion was, practically his opinion was what we are still trying to achieve to decouple like EIP one, the process of specifications versus deployment, and because of that reason, he suggested not to have any of those in EIP one, and that was the result of that was having that EIP, whatever the hard fork meta EIPs, um, what is the name, 233 or something like that, the formal process of hard forks or something like that. And we try to exactly describe the hard fork process in that document and not in EIP1. But I think at some point later, he was on the opinion that it's just bad to have them separate and should be combined into a single one. Yeah, I'm not sure if any of this makes any sense or is useful. I just wanted to give like, some look back why things are the way they are.
I think that's helpful. I think it'd be cool if we got Nick's opinion, like his updated opinion. I should message him about that. I know he probably can't join the meetings because of time zones, but it would be cool to get his opinion on some of
Yeah,
these
I'd agree with that.
ideas.
I feel like that's a good next step for this, honestly, because I don't know exactly which way to put it.
Yeah, and there was a huge discussion last time, so I I don't know if we'll figure it out this meeting necessarily. Um, and we have some new items that we can bring up that are kind of more at the top of everyone's mind, is what I'm getting the feeling of. Um,
Yeah, if someone else has feedback that they want in,
oh yeah,
that
anyone
would be
else have
great.
feedback on this item?
I just wanted to add, like, that sounds like a good next step because we have discussed this topic quite a few times in this call, and we have both opinions. So yeah.
All right. Next up, the EIPIP survey. Edson, is there any updates on this one?
Yeah, so I didn't get through the survey last time. I just got through one item. An update, I sent it out to every EIP author that had their EIP in final, which means the survey kind of has like a little sampling bias because I didn't send it out to ones that only have it in draft. But
That's okay. I think.
So I can set it out to everyone in draft. It might take a little longer, or we could just start finalizing the survey now because the list in drafts is pretty long.
Yeah, the drafts one is really long, and yeah, the drafts one is just really long. I don't think it's worth it, but it's up to you. Obviously, it's your survey.
So the survey should be finalized within a week or two. So by next meeting, it should be final. But the answers fit in pretty much the same categories as they did from the previous time when the blog was released. And those categories are formalizing decision making, and then something I call throughput, where it's like the capacity to push EIPs to completion. And then the last one is clarity. There's a lot of ones like small suggestions that all make the process a little clearer, such as adding use cases to EIPs, figuring out who to talk to if you want to push an EIP to completion, stuff like that. And then throughput is like, oh, we need more EIP editors, we need more EIP champions. So it's onboarding. And then decision making is formalized decision making, trying to reduce politics, stuff like that. So we have a couple ways we could go about them. We could do like the higher order ones, which would be decision making first, addressing those, then addressing the throughput, and then addressing clarity last. Or we could do them all at once, or we could do the easier ones, which is the clarity ones, just kind of like simple changes to EIP1, and then do onboarding or throughput, and then do the higher order changes. Or we could just do them all at once.
I think we should do them in an order. I don't know which order that is.
So if we were going by today's meeting, today's meeting is mostly focused on decision making, which is the agenda items for today. So if we were to do the smaller ones, we might end up changing it if we end up changing the decision making process. So I think doing the higher order ones will be like, we set the bigger pieces in place first. That makes sense.
All right. Yeah. I think, yeah, bigger pieces in place first would be just fine with me.
But yeah, or the next few items are part of that decision making process where it starts with separating them, and once we have them separate, formalizing what the hard fork coordination process is.
Got it. Okay. And so this all is on the, well, I guess we've come to the decision that we're separating the hard fork coordination processes from the EIP standardization processes. Am I right on that, everyone?
Yeah, I think like whatever Edson is coming up with the survey result, most of the things, or maybe part of them, is they're available there in the doc that is shared by James. It's the brainstorming document. So I think we can use that as a reference and prioritize our work. I mean, like what we would want to do. And yes, I think I have seen that thing somewhere too, like making it the separation of the EIP process and the hard fork coordination. I guess it's the agenda item number 5.
Yeah. Anyone else have comments or opinions?
I would just agree that separating them out is the general consensus.
Okay. So that's going to be item 5 that we keep talking about that. So, um, okay. Anything else on the survey? I think, Edson, it's a good idea to do the high, I think you said high order ones first.
Yeah, one last thing on the survey. There was a few comments that people liked about the current process. Let me see if I can go through them real quick.
Sure, that'd be great.
People like that it's legitimate, that it's a formal process. Let me open this up. People like that it focuses on the technical aspects, that it's well defined, that the barrier to entry is low, that anyone that wants to get involved can get involved, and that it's transparent and has a high bar of acceptance. So it allows for fair and thorough review.
So these are, is this about decision making, or is this the things that you just mentioned?
This is just what people currently like about the process.
Oh, just the process, not generally decision. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else have comments on this item?
We should record that somewhere to say these are things we should keep as we're looking at the changes.
Okay. That's a good idea. Would that be in the notes, I guess?
Either in the notes, or we could put it into the EIP1 goals and things that we had thought. I don't know, that just feels like it needs to go somewhere so we can make sure we don't lose those pieces.
Okay. We're talking about a brainstorming document that are later in the call that me and James iterated on a little bit, that we wanted to kind of share some of our thoughts. And so we can add it to there. That'd be one place. And then also on the notes would be good. Any other comments?
Just a verification, Edson, you're doing notes for today's meeting, right? It's not us.
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Okay, number 4, making decision-making async from the all core dev calls. So this would be...
Should this be being recorded?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I didn't see the light anywhere.
Oh, you're right. Well, I am recording it on YouTube.
Okay, great. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So making decision-making async from the core dev calls, I think this is the same thing we've talked about a couple of times in the last few items, as in we are still... It's still an undecided thing that we're trying to get through. Oh, also Hayway.
Yeah, I think on that point, like, we just mentioned, say, trying to get Nick Johnson's opinion, and he can't come to these calls. So I feel like in general we should try and move, if we're moving the hard fork coordination process like out of the EIP process, then trying to see what are things we can do to make both those processes less reliant on the calls. It feels like it's probably easier for the EIPs than the hard fork coordination. Just so it's, I guess, more inclusive, and also things tend to be much clearer in writing than on calls. Like, it's easier to figure out, what was actually said, to state it explicitly, and just to search for stuff, whereas calls are quite hard for all those things. So I think, like, as we kind of move these processes, we should really try and figure out how we can make them more async.
Okay, good points. Other people?
This is feedback from the survey also. That the one frustration was that the decision-making process was too reliant on live calls. I guess it was because not everyone who wanted to get involved could get involved due to time.
Okay. I agree with that assessment that we need something like pushing stuff more to the Ethereum Magicians forums, for example, um, or maybe a series of subtopic EIP chat rooms or stuff like that.
Artem last time recommended Zoolip.
That's right, and I actually worked with him, or really he took lead on this, but he made a Zoolip and I joined it. I haven't seen any progress on that, and I've been pretty loud about my feedback that I don't think we could get people to move to Zoolip just because everybody's either on Gitter or Discord. So getting a whole new tool involved would be a lot of friction. Not impossible, but a lot of friction, I think.
I would will be more in favor of going to it Magician itself. Like that's a place we have been using for a while, and I think that may be one of the best places to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. It's just like changing EIP1 to say definitely go through ETH Magicians instead of go through one of 3 or 4 places.
Yeah, in EIP1, it is mentioned as a recommendation that you create a post at ETH Magician, and it is highly recommended to create a post at ETH Magician, and you can also share it at Reddit and Twitter and other places. We might just want to work with the words there instead of recommendation. Like we might want to come up with a word that can make it more as a process instead of giving the freedom over there. Maybe, I mean, that's my thing.
I agree with that. Okay, any other comments on this item? Okay, the next one is separation of the EIP process from hard fork coordination. And we have Axix EIP status model. And I think, James, I think you just posted yours down in the comments, right? Or is that a different item?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the comments of the call of the agenda is James's model, and then Axix models here. So can we have someone kind of give an overview of what these two things are? I think this stemmed from a conversation within the chat.
Yeah, I can give my perspective briefly. So I think my perspective is pretty much in line with a lot of the concepts which have been brought up on this call, and I guess brought up earlier but discussed on this call. So my ideal flow would decouple this hard fork management or any questions related to that. And my flow only is concerned, okay, there's one exception, but it's mostly concerned with the standardization of the specification text, which an EIP is. There aren't that many major changes to how things are happening today. There is only basically one major change, is that review step. So right now, the problem I'm seeing is that we have a draft and then we have a last call, and the last call is supposed to be the final version, where not many, I mean, only maybe tiny typo changes are expected in the last call, but nothing major. And there's nothing in between. And I heard it from different people, and I mean, even from myself, I had that feeling that in many cases drafts change so frequently or in such a way that it's barely recognizable, you know, what a draft looked like a month prior. And it's really hard for people who are not like 100% involved with that given EIP or that given change proposal. It's really hard for them to tell when is the right time to comment. and many people, well, okay, a bunch of people I talked to expressed that they would be looking for some kind of a status where a draft is at a point that external reviewers are invited. So that's basically the review stage, that the draft got to a kind of a stable position. The authors expect external professionals to look at the draft, or the proposal, and give feedback. And the last call is just the last version of this review state, when everybody is like pretty happy. I think that's the only real change in it. I didn't clarify this question regarding withdrawn versus abandoned, because there was like a long discussion. That's why I had withdrawn/abandoned. I think, so I do understand that the abandoned name as it is, some people might not be happy with the name itself, which may be understandable. I'm not sure if it's worth having two statuses, like withdrawn and abandoned, but I think that withdrawn as a status might be a better name. And for those, so withdrawn, I think people are happy who on their own accord want to get an EIP withdrawn. They're happy with the status withdrawn. And for those cases where an EIP is just not looked after anymore, I think we could just call it, it's withdrawn in absence. So I think a single status is enough. I don't think there's any other change here.
I see accepted's gone, and active is now after the review state, and that part confuses me. Is that supposed to replace accepted or redefine active?
So active is there today. Active is a special one for registry EIPs, which we don't really have. I think the EFI is a registry.
Yes. Okay, I get what you're saying now. So
that's active.
It's just for a subset of standard track EIPs, or non-standard track EIPs. Got it.
Yeah, and accepted is removed because that is exactly this this weird status, which is part of the hard fork process.
I see. So final. So the definition of final in here means that it is what? It is agreed upon, or it is in a in a network.
No. This flow only considers the stability of the given EIP text, so the specification. Final means that no change to the specification can happen except of maybe errata changes, so typos or a special section listing bugs in the spec. But there's no change possible to the rules defined in that given spec. So if you want to translate this into a hard fork process on top, then what would happen is when, I guess the EIP-centric process is what this would facilitate. So under the EIP-centric process, the EIPs go through different stages of maturity. And when they reach a stage of final, that means that everybody involved with that EIP is happy, is tested, it should work, nobody expects any changes. And for hard forks, only final EIP should be considered. And then if during this hard forking process, which may be a separate review process, I'm not sure, but if there would be a separate review process during hard fork adoptions, and somebody discovers there's some major issue with the given EIP, then the EIP text, it should not be changed because it is final, but it is possible to create a new version of it under a new number, which has the changes proposed at that point. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense to me. Let's do comments and questions on that, and then we'll go over James's graph.
Yeah, I think it's good to have the text final be just that the spec is frozen, because that way final could mean the same thing for every track.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of this state which calls for a broader community review, because we've seen so many instances in the past where people basically don't look at an EIP until it's already scheduled for a hard fork, and then you get a flood of comments. So if we can and at the same time, I agree. It's kind of unrealistic to expect everybody to look at all the drafts. So yeah, I'm strongly in favor of a status like that.
I have two or three comments or maybe questions. One is about this active. Do we need to keep active after review, or should we put it like maybe after the last call? Because I think any EIP, even if it is active forever, I mean, it's not designed to be completed at any point of time. It should be given a proper visibility, and that can be attained when or maybe when they are put in the last call, the 14 days duration that is there, that's for the visibility, and RSS feed is also there. So that's kind of one thing about active. The second thing, I like the idea of withdrawn and abandoned, and as Exec mentioned, that withdrawn is more suitable word for the abandoned status that we have as of now. I understand that abandoned was introduced just a year back. I mean, like last year in May itself, it was introduced, but it qualifies both the status. One, which is like the EIP has not been progressing for a while, it is abandoned in a way that the EIP author, the original author, did not worry to move it forward. And second, when EIP author decides to withdraw it, because even if the status, the explanation mentioned in the document, it says that it is the abandoned is the no longer pursued by the original author in any of the cases, like whether they don't have time, interest, or whether it is not the right direction to move. So those were two things. And one last thing about final and accepted. I think as per the current EIP 1, the one difference between accepted and the final state is accepted is still the accepted of the EIP for a hard fork upgrade process, and an EIP is considered to be in final if it is implemented by some clients, and the status can be changed only after the upgrade or adoption. So those are my 3 points.
About your first, I very much support or like the way this flow goes, and it fits really well with how I wish things would go. The part about having review after or having active after last call, like thinking about how I've approached writing the EFI one, I would like it to be, I've written it as it's in draft, and then I go through and make it right, and then I can make it be active. I can make it be in review, and then that's requesting other people, hey, it's at a point that you should look at it, and then it goes into active. And if I need to make any changes, I can make those changes and then put it back into review, and so people know they need to look at it again, and then it can go back into active, and that feels like it fits really well.
My comment against that would be the purpose of last call is to make it into that RSS feed so people know that there needs to be it needs to be looked at, even though at that point there should only be minor changes. There's the possibility that a last call can bring up major technical changes, is my understanding.
Yeah, I don't think that's a really good reason to have last call. Like, if we should make a feed for review.
Okay.
I think would be it, or make the feeds fit the process rather than make the process fit the current feeds.
Yeah,
That can be changed.
that's a good point.
Yeah, actually, there is a maybe a year and a half old PR which was never finished to have an RSS feed for every single state. Yeah, and if we do have review, I think it would make sense to also have a feed for that at least. And but I mean, it's not that hard technically to have a feed for every single one. But one comment on active itself, I think active is like a strange kind, and yeah, I'm not even sure. So originally it was only used for EIP1, just to signal that EIP1 can be changed, so it's never final. And then I think active was extended to the idea of using for registries, and the only one right now is EFI, but there was a discussion to maybe have a chain ID registry, but it never materialized. But I'm not sure what would be the right process for getting to active. I think we should rather describe the limited set of circumstances of what kind of EIP can become active. And I would really just say this EIP1 and registries are the only ones. And I mean, I wish we wouldn't have like special ways in this graph, but active is one special kind. I'm not sure we can get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's good to get rid of it either, because we need to be able to not have to go through extra steps in the process and make EIPs superseded every time we want to change something small about EIP1 or the EFI process. That kind of is a lot more bureaucracy for no gain, in my opinion, to have extra steps when it's something that's so fluid.
The reason why I was thinking it to be after the last call, or maybe the next state after the last call, is because as per the current EIP1, it says that some of the, I mean, other than EIP1, no other EIP at this moment is in this state active. So if in future, if we come up with some informational and process EIPs, just like the EFI that we are talking about, it says that the EIP is never meant to be completed, but we can at least follow the steps for EIPs to be there. So that was the thought, that it may be after the last call, and we can go iterate the changes that may be suggested during this last call stat.
So let me make sure I'm getting your comment correctly. Sorry, I'm just processing it. Could you repeat the last part again?
So my suggestion for moving it active status after the last call was because these particular kind of EIPs, those are entering into this EIP process flow, are not ever meant to be completed. At this point of time, we have only one EIP, EIP1. So that is there. And I am not sure what the process was followed at that time. But if in future we want to come up with another other informational EIPs or the process EIPs to be provided the status of active, at least they should follow the initial process of an EIP. And last call may be providing more visibility, but I'm not sure if there is RSS for every other state, so that can be there. But I was thinking that last call should be, like the better previous state for active status of an EIP.
I think your reasoning makes sense, but I would put a counter reasoning. So there's no particular reason I put active there. I think I just put it there somehow. But I have a counter reasoning after we have explained this, why it may make sense to stay there. So last call in the regular flow, last call is the last step after you expect it to make final. And the reason for last call is that you really want to get it right, because once something gets to final, you cannot make any changes to it. However, this is not the case with active, because active specifically says that changes to that text can happen. So maybe because of that reason, last call may not be needed.
I would agree. It's a unnecessary extra step, because last call and final kind of come together.
That makes sense.
I think the thing that's going to help Pooja's argument, though, is the fact that we don't have a step between review and active to identify how it becomes active again. Does that make sense?
Well, that I think should really be up to the actual registry, or whatever it is. Like each one, I don't know if defining, like putting a last call in between review that's special for active.
Yeah, I don't think there should be a
kind of
special
weird.
one.
Like the EFI list is basically, it was on the call stated, and so it's updated. Like, and if it was a chain ID, a chain data, there's a way that the chain ID stuff gets decided, and it would just be updated when it needs to be.
So each registry or EIP1 would have its own champions, and those champions decide how it gets updated, right?
Yeah, or processes for making sure that they kept up to date. And some changes I don't think would need to go back to review. Like if I was adding in another chain ID opcode, chain ID, or something, or if I was adding one EIP to EFI, it shouldn't go back to review. But if I was adding a step to the EFI process or changing the formatting of certain things or adding clarification, clarifying language, then I can put it back to review and have that signal to people to say, hey, there's been significant changes and you should look before we move it back to active.
Okay. I like that idea that each one has its own process as long as that process is defined in the EIP itself. So like if you have the chain ID EIP, you can have a little blurb in there that just says like a process section, or I don't want to make a whole new section of an EIP though, but basically somewhere in the EIP say this is how it's updated, basically.
I mean, I have no over my dead body kind of feeling about this process. It was just a suggestion, but I'm willing to go by the decision of the group.
This might be one of the first major things almost all of us have agreed on. I'm happy about that.
We did it.
We did it. We solved it. We solved.
We did it,
EIPs.
Reddit.
We did it. Okay, so James, did you want to go over your graph real quick? It's very similar to Alex's.
Yes.
I have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Alex, you go
One
first.
quick question here. I'm just generally not seeing. I mean, I'm kind of an outsider and don't really understand all the core dev stuff, but I'm not seeing any decisions level, and it sounds like all the stuff your guy is talking about is we don't make decisions anywhere in this stuff. Where do we make decisions? It sounds like something, if it gets into an EFI registry or something, then it's eligible for inclusion, and where does that fit on this, and what kind of decision happens to get into final, and another question along the same lines, where does ProgPow fit on this map?
Yeah, that's a good question. My answer would be the reason we're separating out the decision-making processes is because there are so many and it's very dependent on the track and type of EIP that we're separating them out right now. So this is what we're getting right now is the EIP flow separate from the decision-making process, because for core EIPs we have the EFI sub-EIP, or I should say registry EIP style, that determines things like the core dev call decides what core EIPs go into different statuses. Yet for ERC, we have different rules for that one. So the whole how are decisions made, if we tried to combine them, it would make this graph absolutely crazy. And so we're keeping that separate right now. And we may not even change how things are decided right now unless they really need to be decided differently, which we haven't even started thinking about.
Okay.
Another comment on that. One of the frustrations among a lot of people that I was seeing was the politics in the EIP process. It was kind of difficult to understand exactly what they meant by that. But I think one way to facilitate that frustration was to isolate the politics part of it from the EIP process itself. So put it in its own section where it's addressed formally, versus putting it entangled within the EIP process. And that would be separating it out into its own process. But yeah, as far as the decision-making process, I think we should keep it with EFI and have the EFI be the start of the decision-making process for hard forks.
And for core EIPs in general too.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Brett?
I think so. The problem is I'm not familiar with enough, so a lot of this extra complexity is hard for me to get my mind around. So I just need to listen to you guys more and stuff like that. But thanks for helping me try and keep up to speed with you guys.
No problem. Takes a long time for everything, and also I don't even get it all. I don't think anyone gets it all.
and could someone answer the question? Does ProgPow fit anywhere on this map?
I can answer that. It would be in final because the specification's final, but it wouldn't be reflected. It would be reflected as not going into mainnet as part of the other process that's not on this list.
Okay, so but in other words, it would, on this list it would be in final, but there would be another place where it says it's not eligible for inclusion. Is that, or
it would be, it's not really determined what it would be called yet, but it would be in the separate process, that information. Like the specification is final. Really, they should be making a new EAP at this point now that this has been clarified, because the
okay,
last one was final.
So in other words, we're explicitly separating that decision from this, and there's going to be some other process that would tell. So in other words, ProgPow would be in final, but there would be some other status system graph or decision-making system which would show it hasn't been eligible for inclusion or has been removed for eligible or something like that.
Whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, I think this is more of a point that we are trying to separate the hard fork process and the EIP process. So it is good in the EIP process, the status is final, but it may not be going to hard fork, or maybe or may not be going. That is going to be a separate process. So as James mentioned, that the ProgPow should be, I mean, like maybe fitting into the final status. So that may be good from the EIP's point of view.
Okay, sounds good. It still just makes me nervous. Everyone's afraid of touching decisions, and let's just kick the can down the street and hopefully that'll be solved somewhere else. But anyway.
Yeah, we were kind of that way. Now we're at the point where it's like there's a necessary separation, so let's deal with what we can first.
Got it. Okay, cool.
All right, James, you want to go over your graph, and then you said something a second ago.
Yeah, this stemmed from the conversation of inactive versus abandoned and sort of things, and I've had some time to think about it since, and the graph is the same other than that it has an additional status for being inactive. And the reason I would add that is what I'd like to have added to the EIP bot or whatever is if a certain amount of time has passed and no one has touched an EIP that's in draft or in review, it should be marked as something saying that it's not being worked on right now. So the community knows what's kind of active being looked at, not active as the EIP status, but actively being developed or has been kind of left by the wayside. So inactive would be a status for if the robot applies the status, and then withdrawn would be for when people just remove an EIP for consideration. And the reasoning I think that's important is it signals why it's in the state it is, and that's good for authors and the community trying to understand where things are and how they got there.
I'd agree with all that, except I don't like the name inactive because that implies that it is related to the active status.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know if active should be called active. So
I don't have a better word for active. That's because I've thought about that before too, where it's like, what does active even mean? But anything else but active would kind of get kind of weird.
Yeah, I haven't figured that out either, but I don't want to have the connotation of them being connected either. So I would want to resolve either one of those directions.
Okay, so but go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think we discussed this last December or January. It would be nice to automate these. I think it was like the first round of like withdrawn, abandoned discussions we had.
Yep.
And I think it's a great idea, even back when we discussed it. But lately I started to maybe come to a different opinion from a technical standpoint. I mean, just going back in general, I'm not the happiest that the EIP number assignment is attached to the pull request number or the issue number, which is the same, because it's just so inflated as people try to, especially people who are not familiar with Git, they struggle with Git and try to submit a change, which grows into like 15 different PRs and stuff is just getting inflated. And I wonder, if you purely, I mean, yeah, you haven't clarified, and I don't think anyone would fully know what would be, how would it be determined that something is inactive? If we purely look at the, I mean, what the bot could look at is really when was the file last modified? That's the only thing the bot could really look at. And that only means that if somebody just creates a PR and changes a single letter or changes white space, just adds a new space somewhere in the file, then it's active again. Wouldn't this, this automatic process of marking them inactive based on like last change date, wouldn't that really just become like a race into people submitting PRs to just change something so it becomes active again, and we just keep inflating the numbers?
So the inflating the numbers one is definitely an issue, and I'm wondering if that suggests that that's something that should be solved first before having and like some way of deciding EIP numbers that won't be inflated by the PR could solve that. The as far as the editing goes, if an author is the one who is going back in and making the change, then I think that means it's still like having that bump happen. As long as the explosion of PR numbers is solved by some other thing that we discuss at some point, then I don't mind if an author comes in and just changes one thing to make sure that it stays in review, because that means that he's looking at that he's actively looking at the repository. And a lot of them, I think, would just fall to inactive, and then no one and only authors really can make an edit, or EIP editors, and an EIP editor wouldn't have a reason to keep it active. And if an author isn't there to keep it going, then that's the definition of inactive.
I think that regardless of what we come to as far as EIP numbering, there's a good reason to have two separate statuses, because one of them implies that it was the author's decision to withdraw it, and the other one implies that it is inactive due to the author like completely not dealing with it anymore, so like abandoning it. And I think that's an important distinction, because otherwise people are going to be like, if there's withdrawn statuses, people are going to make assumptions it's one or the other, and there's nowhere in the EIP that we can say this is why it got closed, except for that status. We could point them to like a PR or the bot or something like that, but people, that's like too many extra steps. So people are just going to assume withdrawn means what the traditional definition of withdrawn is.
Yeah, well, what difference does it really make for an outside viewer?
For an outside viewer, they can accuse someone of being like lazy with their EIP. They could say that that person didn't care when really it was withdrawn because of reasons. So like if I see the status withdrawn and I'm like, well, what happened here? I can email that person, because their email's in the header, and say, why did you decide to withdraw this EIP? Rather than if it's abandoned, I can say, well, I don't know if I should email them. Their email might not even be active anymore for this EIP. They haven't touched it in a while. There's no use in me talking to them.
But
That's like one case.
would a status the only and the best solution, or even in EIP1 we have I think decision URL and notes and fields like that which are not utilized, but I wish they would be. And on the same note, we could have, and many other like specification processes outside of Ethereum make use of such extra fields. So they don't try to inflate the number of statuses, rather they describe, in text what was the reason. So as an example, if we would have just a single withdrawn status, which signals both withdrawn by the author and withdrawn by inactivity, we could still have a field which properly, eventually it would be nice, it would be some kind of a URL to the decision text which explains why it happened. But initially we could just have the text say, this was withdrawn automatically by the bot on this date, or it could state the reason from the author, I've withdrawn this because I don't think it's a good idea anymore. Wouldn't that be a better solution than just having two status fields, which, they do explain a bit of the story, but they don't explain everything?
That's good. I would like more of the story explained. So you're saying, just to make sure I understand your suggestion, the bot itself would do a PR on the EIP if it gets abandoned, and it says this was abandoned on this date. Otherwise, if it's withdrawn, one of the steps needs to be the author saying why it's withdrawn, right?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I'm kind of like babbling, but let me just open EIP1. It had, where the hell is it?
Here, I can just paste it. I had to look for it earlier.
So there is one more thing here mentioned in the EIP1 is about transferring the EIP ownership. I mean, that is related to abandoned status. I think it's the further explanation of that. In that it mentions that the transfer of this ownership can happen in two circumstances. The one is...
Pooja, can we, sorry to interrupt, can we just finish the previous?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. I mean, I was just trying to come up to your point only. I mean, I found that was like mentioned in the EIP1. So please go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, just before we go on a tangent. So I just found it. So there's this field, this extra field in EIP1, which is not used right now. Sorry for the background noise. Okay, I think it's better. So, and more trucks. Okay, so
I can hear you fine.
There's this field called resolution on EIP1. It's under this EIP header preamble. There's requires, replaces, superseded by, and the last one is resolution, a URL pointing to the resolution of the EIP. Now this is not used, but we could actually make use of this and say that for every withdrawn status, there needs to be a resolution field which explains why it became withdrawn.
I like that idea. I think it's already in there, so there's not much work that has to be done.
One comment in regards to the PR. I know RFC, they like comparing to our process, they have once the standards in draft, they have a timer of 24 months. That's 2 years. That if it's not pushed to for our process, it would be final. That it would be considered whether to be put into withdrawn automatically or to be reopened by the request of the author to continued. So we could have PR based on not the last time it was edited, but the time it was created. And then the EIP bot could ping the author, and if there's no response, it can automatically be put to withdrawn by X number of months after it was created.
I like that automation personally. And Pooja, this is kind of related to what you were talking about a little bit, right? This idea of letting the author or the author being able to reactivate it.
Yes, I was actually thinking, I mean, like I was more towards exec opinion, like making it withdrawn with automated bot or with personal like interest, but both are going towards the same place. Like one thing that is missing here is, as per EIP1, if an EIP is in the status of abandoned, that can be pursued if we want. Like that is not, I cannot find it in either of the diagram. So that is one thing. And another thing is like the abandoned EIP can change their ownership, and this can occur in two circumstances. Number one, when author does not want to pursue it, or they do not have time to do that, or maybe they don't agree with the direction it is moving. So I think it is fulfilling all the criterias, and just because it is done by bot and done by person, having two status maybe adding too much to EIP1. So we can maybe broaden the definition of one and make it like withdrawn / abandoned or inactive or whatever we choose. So I was going more towards having one status with a broader explanation to,
Yeah, that sounds like what we're kind of all getting to is utilizing the resolution header more and making instead of using abandoned and withdrawn, just having withdrawn, and making sure that the definition correctly states what that means and how to use the resolution header better.
Yeah, that's what I meant to.
So Axic, if the PR explosion of EIP numbers was resolved, does that kind of resolve pieces of this, or is there other parts of this that is not resolved that are important for you? Or like what pieces are left?
I mean, I'm personally just a bit worried in having more statuses than we definitely need. And that was the only reason I argued maybe against having withdrawn and abandoned separately, because we are trying just to reduce the number of these different statuses. And if we could make use of the resolution field to actually explain why that happened, I think that may be much better, because more reasoning can be put there than what the status on its own can explain. And I think that because if we make use of this resolution field, then we don't even need the inactive status, because the resolution could just say, in case of it's turned inactive, the resolution could say this has been turned inactive by the bot because there was no activity for 2 years or whatever.
Sounds good.
Okay. The part I think we would miss from having it be separated as a status, and this isn't me saying I'm like really pushing for it to be one way or the other. I'm just thinking out loud of what's the trade-off for having it not have its own status, is when navigating EIPs, there's a ton of them all over the place, and there would be a lot more inactive ones and a lot less withdrawn ones. And so perhaps someone trying to understand where something is in the process, you would still have to go into each EIP and figure out what it was withdrawn or not withdrawn, instead of having it just be readily visible from itself. And I don't know what is the justification for why a status should be existing, or does that make sense? Like why we could like
Yeah,
what
I think
if the purpose makes sense or not. Anyway, I actually keep going.
No, I think your reason makes a lot of sense. But I would say it would be possible to maybe display the resolution on that list on the page. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, technically, definitely could be displayed, but maybe it would be too long. I'm not sure. But I would, again, maybe just ask the question, who is the target audience to? Why would anybody, if they see like a lot of withdrawn versus inactive, why would they care? I think it's really up to the author to, if they see their stuff turn withdrawn by the bot, it's their responsibility to act on that. And I mean, does it really matter to people watching the website whether something was turned inactive or withdrawn?
I think it would.
So one kind of controversial example that I think illustrates this a little bit better, like the block rewards EIP that I wrote forever ago. If it was inactive, people could still be worried that it might resurrect. But if I had it in withdrawn, they can be confident that I have withdrawn that, and I can say it's because of feedback from the community. And
but that's only you. It can be resurrected even if it's withdrawn.
But it has to be a new number.
It has to be a new number. It'd have to be a new number, and then I'm talking about the community members. Like maybe it doesn't need to be a new number, but the community members who are looking at it can see very clearly that this was something that was proposed and it's no longer proposed. And of course it's on me for putting it up again, but like the status of it for the community's sake is clear up front, that the reason that it wasn't, it just wasn't ignored and it's going to come up again.
So I see two problems. One, maybe we should clarify at some point if withdrawn can be resurrected. And I understood that any kind of withdrawn, whether it's abandoned, withdrawn, inactive, whatever, it can be resurrected without changing the number. That's question or topic one. But the second comment I have to this is, aren't we, in this particular example you give, aren't we mixing the specification process with the hard fork process? So why does it matter if it's withdrawn or not withdrawn if it's not considered for a hard fork?
It's not mixing the processes necessarily. It's more here's what the community would say. So this scenario, it would be, they'd be up in arms and saying, oh, this can be snuck in at any time, or it will get snuck in. They're doing that with ProgPower right now, and I know that it's not accurate what they're doing, but they're conflating the definition of EIP1 for their own narrative. And if we can make it a little bit more strict, it'll make it harder for them to do that, because right now what they're saying is like for instance, there was a PR on ProgPow the other day, and there was an entire Reddit thread with 64 comments that said ProgPow is being snuck back in. Like stuff like that. That's what we would be avoiding by saying withdrawn, because withdrawn is like, in people's minds, it makes
There's a
more sense.
finality to it.
There's a finality to it, yeah.
But there's no finality in EIP1 regarding withdrawn, because you can resurrect it, right?
Technically, yes, but I don't think the community interprets on that level of
Technicality.
Technicality, yeah. Like they're not thinking about it that deeply.
And we're kind of trying to, I mean, the whole point of us doing this is to kind of make it a little bit more easy for people to understand, more so than, tighten up the technicals, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother conversation, I guess.
I mean, I think even a controversial EIP can be in final, and that just means the spec is frozen. Withdrawal means the spec isn't being developed anymore. So it's kind of in this weird limbo where it's not frozen yet. It's not like developed mature enough to be frozen, but it's not being worked on to be made final.
Like another EIP that would be withdrawn was Martin's previous EIP. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the proposal of gas and oil superseded it as being a better idea. So he withdrew that EIP, and it would be clear to the community that because that is withdrawn, and then so why would someone work on that idea again? If something is inactive, well, maybe it's worth kind of working on again.
Yeah, but the resolution field couldn't explain this.
We don't want people having to go through and look and read a whole web page of something just to get an idea of where things are going in the EIP process.
But it can be displayed on the listing as well.
So you mean the text for the resolution? Like you would grab the text from whatever resolution URL it has?
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, I wouldn't do a resolution URL. As a start, I would just make it resolution text. So it would be just single sentence.
Oh, a sentence can't cover it necessarily. I don't think. I think people would be angry they can't. Things could get misinterpreted for the resolution sentence if they are only allowed a sentence to explain.
But the withdrawn versus abandoned status is enough to make a distinction?
Yes.
What you cannot describe in a sentence?
No, you would still be able to just describe in a sentence, but it would be a little bit easier to make that sentence be useful for other parts of the explanation. Because you're going into that explanation knowing whether it was intentional or not.
So I think withdrawn, having the special meaning for withdrawn, if withdrawn can be resurrected, makes zero sense. If withdrawn is a final status that it cannot be ever resurrected as it is, then I think there's more reason for such a status. But
I think that's good. Yeah,
I'd be fine with that. You have to make a new EIP if you want to pursue it.
But the only such status which actually is missing from any of this, because it was used as part of the hard fork process, is rejected.
We wouldn't need that in this case, would we? It would either be withdrawn, withdrawn, inactive, or draft perpetually.
Yeah, but wouldn't this more like the case of rejected by community or whatever?
Well, because the process would have to reject it. Like the hard fork coordination process, rejecting it is different than an EIP author withdrawing it and saying, "I'm done."
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll have to think on it more, and we're kind of over time. So this is a good thing for us to pick up on next time, and also figure out to also go over the other items on the agenda for next time, because I don't want to keep people on too long. But this was a really good discussion, and I think we kind of came to the conclusion that we except for the withdrawn abandoned section of Axis graph, and James's graph, I guess, because they're pretty much the same except for the inactive withdrawn section. We were coming close to a resolution on that, which would be a big step.
Just one thing before we leave. One point I wanted to check with the exec here, like in this withdrawn abandoned section, there is nothing going back to the draft, but as per the definition, if people would want to, somebody else would want to champion any other EIP, they can do that. So is that something like missing, or is that not going to be in the new process?
Yeah, I think I hastily put this one together by just reducing my old versions, but in the old versions I had all the missing directions. So what's missing here is that from last call, you could go back to review. And I think from withdrawn and abandoned, you could go back to draft. But yeah, I mean, maybe for the next call, all of these charts should be way more clarified. And I think it was a good discussion starter, but definitely wasn't like the final version to be discussed.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you in 2 weeks on the 3rd of June. I was about to say unless someone isn't going to be here, but I was like, where's everyone even going to go? Everyone's in their homes. So, okay, well, we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Like,
All right.